Thank you for being here. I know it's Thursday night. It's the start of the weekend. So thanks for coming. And we will follow the same pattern we've done the previous nights, 30, 30, 30. So we'll start with the first two speakers, and then we'll have about 20, 30 minutes of Q&A at the end, reserved for both talks. The first speaker is a friend and colleague at Michigan State University in the Department of Advertising and Public Relations. Dr. Salim Alabash is going to give us a different perspective than we've had so far this week, so I'm really excited. So please help me welcome Dr. Alabash to the stage.
Thank you. All right, can you guys hear me all right? Okay, so hi, my name is Salim, and I'll start with telling you a little bit about myself and the work that I do. And as Eric has pointed out, it might be very different from what you've been hearing because I work in the Department of Advertising and Public Relations, and I might be bringing a different perspective. So I grew up in Palestine, and when I was 15 years old, I co-founded a nonprofit organization to help young Palestinians who are at risk discover their voices through media and social activation projects. So that's me in the first ever youth TV show on the national television. And then after doing that for 8 or 9 years, I moved to the United States. I got my degrees from the University of Missouri in Columbia. And then I joined Michigan State University. And this is the first lecture that I actually used the title Associate Professor, because I just got tenure. So it's pretty awesome. So the research that I do is focused on this concept of digital persuasion. And just to be on the same page, what I perceive as digital persuasion is any process where someone's attitude and or behavior is changing because of something they saw on any type of technology. It could be a mobile phone, or it could be a social media or a video game. And what's interesting is this new wave of persuasion research really looks at, because traditionally persuasion has to deal a lot with a message that has an intent to persuade you. And a lot of what we're seeing in today's world does not have the intent to persuade you. A lot of what we're seeing on social media and electronic word of mouth is really extending beyond that, having that intent. So it's both with and without intention to persuade someone is what I study. And in general, my research has been focused on in a number of contexts, including I've done a lot of research on alcohol use and social media and how alcohol affects, how exposure to alcohol-related messages on social media affects people in terms of their readiness to drink. I've also explored a lot of research on digital aggression, or what is known as cyberbullying. I've done research on online safety, and also part of my research and my training is in trying to understand racial and cultural stereotypes in a mediated context. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on today. So, but before I get to that, I wanted us to also get on the same page in terms of some of the assumptions that my research operates under. So these are arguable truths. You can disagree with me. But the first one is, whenever we look at mediated communication, media messages, we have to understand that every single media message is so complex. Everything that you see on social media or on television, we can't isolate the effect on attitudes and behaviors to a single element in that message, because let's say you're watching a political ad, there's music, there's moving pictures, there's narrative. All of these contribute to creating that effect. So this is why whenever we look at media, we have to understand that both media messages and experiences are really complex. The second assumption is that human beings are complicated beings. It is really hard. They often lie. They don't tell the truth all the time. And this is critical to understand in terms of how we measure these effects of mediated communication. They are also increasingly and heavily selective. Audience members are not dumb. If they don't like what you're putting out there, they will not use it. You can't force them. There is so many options. The media environment is so fragmented that there's gazillion pieces of information every day that we are exposed to. But they're also irrational and impulsive by nature. They follow their impulses, they have limited cognitive capacities, and they make decisions that are very automatic. We try to minimize the kind of effort, the amount of efforts that we expend in making decisions and reacting to media content. And they're also inherently social. They're a social being, and this is why social media is so popular right now, because it really taps into that, socialization aspect. And the sixth assumption, which is relevant to what we're talking about today, is humans are inherently biased. Whether we like it or not, automatically they are biased. And the way that we are different as human beings is in our ability to control our automatic impulses, our automatic responses. So with these assumptions, I want to set the stage for what I'm going to talk about today. But in other words, humans are Homer Simpson, right? So that kind of sums up who we are. Every time I give a talk about digital and social media, I get asked the question of, well, how social media are different from traditional media. And this is something I also want to clear out before I start my talk. Whenever we compare social and digital media to traditional media like television, newspapers, and radio, in both of these types of media, we are exposed to content, different types of content in different modalities. And you probably know that on social media, there's these functionalities of interactivity. Not only can we interact with content by liking it, sharing it, commenting on it, but also we are content creators. And this makes a big difference in terms of trying to understand this big behemoth of social media and how it infiltrates our lives. So for example, this is one of my favorite ads. So traditionally, this ad would play on the Super Bowl, and this ad actually was the first ad ever to be put online on YouTube before the Super Bowl. So it was historic in that, and I like to also bring it because one of the creators of one of the team members is an MSU graduate, and I know this might not be the territory to boast that, but nonetheless. But in today's world, you'll see that ad on Facebook posted by your very dear friend John Smith, who has given meaning to that ad by their own comment, but you can also interact with it. You can like it, comment on it, share it, and even love it and cry about it and get angry about it. And these are so important because they have meanings outside of that environment. But what's also interesting is that these behaviors that are online are habitual and automatic. How many of you checks their cell phone, mobile phone, social media in their bathroom? Right? You can raise your hand. That's fine. Here we go. So how many of you, before liking something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, spend some time thinking about it before liking it? Right? So much lower percentage. But most of us, we're going through our news feed and we're liking stuff in an automatic way. So some of the research that we've done in my lab is we bring people in and we have them use their own Facebook. And here you're seeing these red dots. These are where their eyes are going. So we use eye tracking measures to kind of see where their eyes are moving. And as they are using the Facebook in this case, we are recording their psychophysiological measures. And psychophysiological measures are physiological measures such as heart rate, skin conductance level, and facial electromyography or muscle activation on the face that indicate psychological processes. And what's interesting is we were able to code these segments of Facebook use into segments that ended with the like button and segments that did not end with the like button. And what's so interesting about, and I'm going to focus on the like button because it's the most prevalent behavior. The like button, when we look at heart rate data, so heart rate data can indicate a number of things psychologically. It can indicate allocation of cognitive resources, or in lay terms, attention. but also there is a specific response that is indicated by this pattern of heart rate activation that is called the orienting response. And the orienting response is the what is it response. So if someone walks into that door right now and starts screaming, automatically our system, without our consciousness, will tell us to move our heads and focus on whoever is at that door. This is the response that we're seeing right before people are clicking on the like button, which tells us that clicking on the like button is automatic. Duh, but now we have the data to show that this particular behavior is thoughtless. People don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. It is pretty automatic, and it grows out of habit. But let's back up a second, and I'll back up a little bit to my doctoral dissertation. So this is when I thought that I could solve the world's problems, and I could believe I could fly, right? And unfortunately, so I'll talk about it a little bit. So in my doctoral dissertation, you're seeing this is a video game where people can play the role of the Israeli prime minister or a Palestinian president. And it's a simulation decision-making game. So they have to make all these decisions in terms of, do I attack, do I not attack? And they get a score that really resembles the approval rating of multiple stakeholders, including their own people and a bunch of other stakeholders. So that game emerged when I started my doctoral education. I thought it was really interesting. And I dedicated my dissertation to understanding whether playing that game, this particular game, in either role, the Israeli prime minister or the Palestinian president, would tilt people's attitudes one way or another. So the game was called Peacemaker. So the whole idea was to understand the effect of role play on how people change their attitudes and behavior, and their attitudes toward both national groups, Palestinians and Israelis. So participants were randomly assigned to play the role of Palestinian president or Israeli prime minister. They played the game for 20 minutes, and we measured their attitudes toward both national groups before and after the gameplay. And what we notice is, for those who played the role of Israeli prime minister, we didn't see much change in their attitudes. You can see these are change scores between the pre-test and post-test, so we're not seeing much change. However, those who played the role of the Palestinian president did observe change in their attitudes. So they had a positive change in their favorability toward Palestinians and a negative change toward their favorability toward Israelis. And you know, it is interesting to see it from a scientific perspective that 20 minutes of gameplay was able to change how people thought and expressed their attitudes toward one national group. So I was like, yeah, that's awesome. But that lasted about 5 seconds, because then things went downhill from there. So this is data from a few years ago. In 2016, this is a trend of the increase in the number of hate groups on Twitter and their popularity. And you can see that there's an exponential growth of expression of hate on social media. Anti-immigration, anti-LGBT, anti-Muslim, anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, anti-everything, right? And this is data from just this past year that was collected by the Anti-Defamation League. So they did, through machine learning and human coding of tweets, and also, so they gathered a bunch of tweets that were randomly selected from the Twitter API, because Twitter only can give you 1%. So they estimated, based on this random sample, that in 2017, there were 4.2 million English language anti-Semitic tweets, just in 2017. Even in Canada, so they noticed that there was a 600% increase in 2006 in hate language on different digital and online forums. So the question is, why is this happening? And I'm not a political scientist, so I cannot speak to that, but I can only postulate, even though this is out of my, there's socioeconomic and cultural shifts in the United States and elsewhere in the world, the post-Obama racial backlash in terms of we have a new reality after a first black president. There's also the global rise in separatist and nationalist movements and other reasons. But what I'm concerned with is, why is this type of behavior happening online? Why do people feel that it's okay to talk aggressively and be racially offensive online? And my thinking, and this comes from theories of psychology, is there's a big difference from expression of aggression when you can see the person eye to eye, that eye contact makes a lot of difference in influencing the intensity of the aggression. So people online think that they are invisible, whether they're visually anonymous or not visually anonymous. Not having anyone there makes them feel that they are invisible. And research in computer-mediated communication tells us that when that happens, when people feel invisible, their inhibition goes down. And when their inhibition goes down, it's okay to express prejudice and stereotype. That filter goes off. And I'm sure that now all of you are thinking about at least one person on your Facebook who has no filter, right? Who thinks that it's okay to say whatever they want. But we're seeing that over and over, and it is important to discuss the ramifications of that, which I'll get to a little later. But there's also that whole idea that trolls will be trolls, right? You can't, there are people who are just going to be trolls online, and we can't do anything about that. But in my research and that of a group, another psychologist that we're collaborating on, we're trying to measure the trait of digital aggression, so people's tendency to be aggressive online. So we're adapting a task called the Taylor aggression paradigm. And this is a game-like scenario, a game-like task where people have to click very fast on a button, and they lose half of the time, and then they win half of the time. In the original task, every time they lost, they would get electric shock. We're not shocking everyone. And every time they lose, they can control the length and intensity of that electric shock. So we're removing that electric shock, and we're introducing a chat function. So people will be playing the game, and every time they lose, they get a mean chat. And we're measuring how long does it take them to become mean themselves. And this is becoming a trait measure of how likely people are to be aggressive online. The interesting part is this explains only 13% of the variance in how aggressive they are on Twitter. So we collect their tweets and we analyze how aggressive they are, but it only explains 13%, which is great, but it means that there are other reasons. There are other factors that contribute to why people are aggressive online, including environmental factors, functional factors in terms of the systems, interpersonal, who do I know, who do I talk with, design, systemic, all, you name it, and we're still unearthing all of these factors. So I want to talk about a study that we've conducted that was quote unquote inspired by Yik Yak. Yik Yak is now dead. It is out of business. However, it was popular a few years ago and was critical in some of the racial outcries in universities like the University of Missouri, because some people posted really offensive, racially charged content. And I apologize if this is offending anyone. But you can see that this is an anonymous app. No one knows who they are. It is geo-based, meaning that it only covers a certain mile radius of where you are, so you're only seeing that content. So it's hyper-local in that sense, but still people were posting things that are awful, plain awful. So we took the most awful of these messages and we kind of packaged them in a different app. We told people that we're doing usability testing for a new app, and we basically gave them 3 types of messages. We gave them, I'll skip. We gave them control messages, moderately racist messages, and severe messages. And to be fair, this was the least severe of that group, because the other ones I don't feel comfortable putting on a slide. And we exposed them to people, and we told them that you can actually use these functions. We wanted to see if they were going to intervene in any shape or form after they see racially charged content. So they could share it, report it, upvote it, or downvote it. So these were our variables. And here's what we found. In terms of downvoting, we see that a lot of people downvoted the racist comments, the racist messages. So 69 to 70% did that for the moderate and severe. In terms of reporting, we see that only 26% reported the moderately racist messages, and about half of the sample reported the severe to the system. But in terms of commenting, which a lot of the intervention literature says that this is the most effective way to counter aggression, we see that 10 to 12% of people would actually speak up, which was pretty disappointing that only 10% of our students are able to actually see something that is so wrong, yet choose not to do anything about it. But do something that is passive, but not put themselves in confrontation with the aggressors. So we're thinking about it, and we decided to add other variables. So we added two new variables. The first one is the inoculation manipulation. So basically, the whole idea is that there's tons of literature that says that if you tell people something is coming, they'll be more likely to expect it and more likely to formulate a way to respond to it, right? So we basically told them, hey, there's been some racist remarks on this app. We're just letting you know. Some people got that, and other people didn't get that. And the other manipulation is a self-efficacy manipulation. A lot of the psych literature and cognitive psychology says that when you train people and tell them this is the best way to perform or enact a behavior, this is the best way to do something, they will do it. So kind of putting the responsibility on the system to train and increase the literacy of the people. So we didn't find an effect for inoculation, so it was not effective. Whether people knew or didn't matter, because probably they expect that this is an anonymous app and there's going to be trolls on it. But self-efficacy did work. It did work in the sense that it wasn't much different for downvoting. People are okay behaving in a passive way and doing something in a passive way, and as well in terms of reporting. However, we see that from 10%, we've increased by telling people, hey, if you comment, if you counter what the racists are saying, that's a good way to stop that. And we see that there's a big jump in their likelihood to enact that behavior, which I think is great. But aside from intervening, part of my research looks at what happens when people are exposed to racially charged content on social media in terms of the effectiveness. And I want to go back to distinguishing traditional media from social media, because on traditional media, everything that you're seeing is driven by editorial processes. It is scheduled, so if you open CNN, everyone in your geographic area will be seeing the same exact content. It will not be tailored. However, on social media, there are no editorial policies. All social media behave like media companies, but they consider themselves tech companies. This has ramifications, and you can see that in Zuckerberg's testimony at Congress.
Publisher, because I think that goes to a really important question on what form of regulation or government action, if any, we would take.
Senator, this is a really big question. I view us as a tech company because the primary thing that we do is build technology and products.
You said you're responsible for your content, which makes
Exactly.
you kind of a publisher, right?
Well, I agree that we're responsible for the content, but we don't produce the content. I think that when people ask us if we're a media company or a publisher, my understanding of what the heart of what they're really getting at is, do we feel responsibility for the content on our platform? The answer to that, I think, is clearly yes. But I don't think that that's incompatible with fundamentally at our core being a technology company where the main thing that we do is have engineers and build products.
So, but he's trying to get out of it, but they're definitely responsible for the algorithm, and the algorithm informs that every one of you has a totally different experience that is based on your interests, who you've interacted with. So you could be seeing an ad for Starbucks, but you could be seeing it before pictures of my kids or my post about school shootings, right? So it's a totally different experience. So we wanted to see, is there an effect of the context? If you see something that is emotional, will that influence how you process an ad that is totally irrelevant? So we gave people pictures, and then we gave them ads. And we do see there's a difference in terms of their psychophysiological responses and also their self-report measures of ad effectiveness. So the idea then is we implemented the same type of methodology, but now we gave people racist YouTube videos versus non-racist videos, and in between we placed an ad for toilet paper. And we wanted to see if the racist content will influence how they are perceiving the ads. And fair enough, it does. So it influences, of course, their attitude toward the video. So the neutral videos were more liked than the other videos, the racist videos. The ads that were placed in the neutral videos were liked more. The brands were also liked more when they were placed in the neutral videos. And the ads that were placed in the racist videos were perceived as more intrusive. But there was no effect on purchase intention. But the whole idea, and I know, am I good on time, or I should be wrapping up? So the idea is, why does this matter? Because algorithms are biased too. There's been tons of research that shows that algorithm, the way that they're set up, who sets them up, influences the types of content they give to people. So this is an example. Are you guys familiar with Thai tweets? Okay, great. So Thai tweets is a chatbot that Microsoft has created a few years ago. And the whole idea was they wanted to put that chatbot on Twitter and have it interact with people. And people started tweeting at Thai tweets. And you can see that, it said, hello world. And then here's a question, humans, why isn't National Puppy Day every day, right? And only within a few hours, people were giving it really bad content. And this is what Thai was tweeting. So Thai became the most racist person on Twitter. And that is because the machine was learning racist behavior from the humans, right? So in a few hours, Microsoft decided to stop the operation, deal with the PR crisis. And if you tweet at Thai Tweets now, it'll tell you, I'm sorry, the engineers are still working on fixing me, right? But it also extends to other avenues. There was a big campaign a few years ago of how Google, these automatic queries or autocomplete queries were not really reflective of ethical ways of dealing with different groups. So it has ramifications. It has ramifications in terms of when algorithms are biased, they will give content to certain people but not other people. They will give opportunities to certain people but not other people. There will also, there are predicting that if this continues, it'll influence if you get approved for a loan or not based on the algorithm, if you're able to rent an apartment, and people are not understanding the transparency of it. And you can see that this is high, there's a lot of news now. They've just announced, Facebook, that they are suspending 32 accounts that were spewing bad content. But there's hope. So Google, after that big campaign, adjusted the algorithm to say good things and not racially motivated things. So I think there's hope. And I'm going to leave you with 3 quick ideas. So the first one is there has to be an investment in literacy, in teaching people what is it that they're dealing with, understanding this complex environment. There's also a system fix. There has to be a way to build and modify and maintain these systems without running the risk of disadvantaging certain people. And I do believe that Mr. Zuckerberg is totally wrong, and he should be pushed to actually acknowledging that Facebook is a media company. and that it has to adhere to federal regulations and industry regulations. So I want to acknowledge my collaborators, and I believe we're taking questions later, but thank you.